Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. This is Movies by McManus, the podcast where we talk about movies, books, TV, comics in the context of its creator and in the context of what effect it's trying to have on the rest of the world. So I'm your host, Greg. I'm joined by my brother, Mike. And so for our first episode, we're going to talk about Chaos, Charles Manson, the CIA, and the Secret History of the 60s by Tom O'Neill. So this book is kind of a wild ride. There's kind of a lot to unpack, which so I'm glad I'm doing this. We're doing this in a podcast. We did this also in a 10-minute video on our YouTube channel if you want to check that out. But just we can go further into detail because there's a lot to unpack here.
Yeah, you could also see the video version of the podcast on our YouTube channel as well if you're interested in that.
Right. So Tom O'Neill, he's an investigative journalist, and he kind of spent the last 20 years investigating Charles Manson, kind of like in a different way than most people would be used to it. So the book kind of takes you on his journey as he's figuring things out about the Manson case. You're also figuring it out, and he's telling how he's getting bounced around from different publishers, from different magazines.
Yeah. It's just really an incredible story just in general about perseverance.
Yeah.
Personally on Tom O'Neill's side. I mean, he as Greg stated, it started as a magazine assignment that fell through. Then he had a book deal. Then the book publisher sued him. It's just this crazy story that kind of, explains why it took him 20 years to come out with it. But it's just kind of a good life lesson. Yeah, personally.
Well, it's crazy, and when you're reading the book, as kind of the things that come out get more and more ridiculous, you almost feel bad for him too. Like when MK Ultra, when the CIA mind experiments kind of play into the Charles Manson story, you're like, oh God, now he has to go on to this, and now even more publishers aren't going to take him seriously,
Yeah, I mean, just continuously uncovering different insane elements that it's just impossible to fit into a book. No,
and it's a lot to unpack, and it at times it can be hard to follow, almost just because there is so much stuff. But you see that, things with the CIA, with things with any government conspiracy, it leaks into different. It leads into all different aspects of life. So they talk about MK Ultra, the government mind control experiments. They go into the JFK assassination a bit, and they talk about Haight-Ashbury, the free medical clinic. But where I want to start talking about it was Tom O'Neill and Vincent Bugliosi. How he started because he kind of catches Vincent Bugliosi in a lie in his first interview.
You should explain who he is, too.
I should explain who he is. So Vincent Bugliosi is Charles Manson's prosecutor. So he was
just general piece of shit.
And a general terrible person. So Vincent Bugliosi... he prosecuted Charles Manson, and basically he's caught in two different things. So one, Terry Melcher was a music producer who owned the Sharon Tate house before Roman Polanski and Sharon Tate. And when Terry Melcher was on the stand, he basically said he only had met Charles Manson maybe 3 times, and he never met him after the murders, because the motive for why they chose that house was that Charles Manson wanted to instill fear into Terry Melcher. He wanted Terry Melcher to immediately think oh, that used to be my house, so I must be in danger. But according to eyewitness testimony, Terry Melcher had visited Charles Manson 3 times after the murders.
Terry Melcher was the Beach Boys producer.
He was
right?
the Beach Boys producer. Yes.
And that's how
he was.
Manson,
Well, he was also just like a huge music producer at the time, like in general.
and that would explain why Manson knew Dennis
knew
Wilson
him.
and-
Manson knew Terry Melcher through Dennis Wilson of the Beach Boys.
Right.
So Manson knew Dennis Wilson because Dennis Wilson picked him up hitchhiking. He picked him up hitchhiking, and Manson was like, hey, I got all these girls. You know, Dennis Wilson was also very into the hippie movement. He's like, we got these girls, we got LSD. And Manson kind of lives at Dennis Wilson's house for a little bit. This is like in late 68, like early 69. After Charles Manson leaves San Francisco, he's living at Dennis Wilson's house. Dennis Wilson kind of becomes afraid of who Manson is, and
that's weird.
Yeah, no, he seems
he
like
giving off like
he seems like
creepy
a
vibes or
totally
something?
like
I don't know.
reasonable dude. Yeah, exactly. So Dennis Wilson, instead of even like kicking Charles Manson out because he's so afraid of him, he just leaves his house, and he leaves the house to Manson. And then not that long afterwards.
Imagine the effect you have to have on someone where they're like, you know what, dude, just fucking keep the house.
Well, he was a creepy dude. He was into acid. I had a bunch of underage chicks. I don't know. He was a gross guy. But it's not that long afterwards he goes to Spawn Ranch. And
What's Spawn Ranch for the people?
So Spawn Ranch is where Manson and his family were staying while the murders were being committed.
Gotcha.
It was kind of his base of operations. Maybe he had a stockpile of guns. He had a stockpile of different drugs. They were kind of running an auto theft operation out of it,
like an organized crime family.
It is kind of organized crime, and you look at like the similarities of how the
Charles Manson's really Italian.
Yeah. But you look at how Charles Manson was treated by law enforcement. It's not that dissimilar to how informants of organized crime are treated by law enforcement.
Why don't you expand upon that? We were talking the other day about the idea of upper echelon informants.
Yes. So, the FBI, I know we said that Charles Manson specifically was working for the CIA, but when you consider that with Chaos and with Cointel Pro, CIA and the FBI had similar goals, and they went about achieving those goals in similar way, we can assume that kind of what goes for the FBI goes for the CIA. So we're looking at people like Whitey Bulger, who committed multiple murders. He was a known drug dealer. He was a known pedophile. And the Boston FBI let him get away with this because he
Whitey Bulger, the famous crime boss in the Boston area. Yeah. I mean, the Winter Hill Gang.
Yeah.
Essentially a form of Boston Irish mob, you would kind of consider it, right?
You can kind of consider it.
Although Flemmy was Italian, so...
Well, there were, not to get into Whitey Bulger too much, there were kind of two different Irish mob groups in Boston, and then they kind of formed under one group called the Winter Hill Gang.
Right.
Whitey Bulger and Stephen Flemmy, they both become FBI informants kind of at this... Stephen Flemmy first and then Whitey Bulger afterwards, and then they rat out everybody above them in the Winter Hill Gang and basically take over the gang. But since he was providing information against the Italian mafia, they basically let Whitey Bulger do whatever he wanted.
Right, and the connection to the Chaos book being that seemingly a lot of the actions of law enforcement in California as it pertains to Charles Manson sort of echoes what you would consider to be an upper echelon informant, meaning someone who's essentially worth more to law enforcement on the street than behind bars.
Exactly. I mean, you look at so many people. You look at Greg Scarpa in Brooklyn, who
Colombo?
He was part of the Colombo crime family. Greg Scarpa was a drug dealer. He was once asked, how many people have you killed? And he said, I stopped counting at 50. So we know
that's reasonable.
Yeah.
You know, you're going to start to forget after a certain point.
Well, yeah. I mean, you don't want it to haunt you.
I mean, that's math.
Yeah.
I hate numbers.
So I should start with in 1967 when Charles Manson kind of gets out of prison.
Yeah.
Because this is where his kind of upper echelon informant status starts.
Right.
So before that, he's 32 when he gets out of prison. He had spent most of his life in federal prison, and that kind of comes important later, talking about MK Ultra.
He was in federal prison because he was primarily what he was doing as a criminal was auto theft, but he was crossing state lines, which made it federal,
which made it a federal offense.
Right,
exactly. So. He gets out in Los Angeles County. He's not supposed to leave Los Angeles County, but he does. He goes up to San Francisco without telling, the LA parole office. And he's living in Oakland, which is right across from San Francisco. And his parole officer there was a guy named Roger Smith. Mm-hmm. So he's going there. He wasn't supposed to be in San Francisco to begin with, and he meets Roger Smith, who becomes his parole officer. And Roger Smith also works for this place called the Haight-Ashbury Free Medical Center, which is in, the Haight-Ashbury area of San Francisco. And it's his idea that Charles Manson goes to San Francisco to Haight-Ashbury, so it's very interesting that it's his parole officer who only has one client, Manson. He doesn't have any other parolees that he works with.
And that's there. I'm assuming Tom O'Neill gives a source for that in the book. Like,
he does. I'm not good. Yeah.
I get it.
Does.
I'm just saying. Okay.
Because
that's pretty. I mean, that alone
is very weird. It's very weird that he only had one client. They said it's normally like 50 is like how many clients you would have for a parole officer.
Right.
But anyway, Charles Manson. So basically, it is his parole officer's idea that Charles Manson becomes a hippie. He believes that absorbing the vibes of the Haight-Ashbury, all that hippie vibes, is going to tone Charles Manson out and make him a more stable person, which logically doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I mean, maybe
this guy's crazy. Let's give him drugs.
Yeah, exactly. But so another thing that's happening in Haight-Ashbury at the same time is in 1967, the Haight-Ashbury Free Medical Clinic starts up. It's David Smith and it's Roger Smith who run it. And David Smith is doing LSD experiments on mice while he's having all these hippies come in and getting free treatment at this clinic that he runs. He's doing LSD experiments on mice. He claims he never did it on humans, though sometimes in interviews he'll sneakily wink at the fact that maybe he was studying some people.
So many fucking creepy people in this story.
There's so many creepy people, but then when Haight-Ashbury Clinic gets involved with the CIA is a man named Jolly West. So Jolly West had an office in the Haight-Ashbury Free Medical Clinic, where I should say Charles Manson was going every day, one, to see his parole officer because Roger Smith's office was there because he ran the clinic, and also because the girls, he had kind of started his family at this time. It was, it was maybe 5 or 6 of them.
Yeah.
Was going there pretty much every day to get, free medical treatment, STDs checks, all that stuff. So you have Manson and you have this CIA agent, Jolly West, in the same place. And Jolly West he had, it's proven that he was doing LSD experiments on people.
Yeah.
So Jolly West had something called Operation Midnight Climax.
Yeah.
And Midnight Climax was basically...
Great name.
Great.
That's an all-time name. I mean, let's be honest.
It is a great name.
Credit
Well, it's
where
a great
credit's
name for
due.
what happened because it involved prostitutes. Because
Two for
Jolly West, he ran what was like a brothel almost, but Johns would go in and then the prostitutes would basically drug them with LSD, and then Jolly West would decide what was going on with them. Study them and all that, and it
was basically a sort of a setup where the detective Jolly West or other detectives there would be behind a mirror that only they could see through.
Yes.
And they would observe these Johns who were on drugs.
But it wasn't just Johns. It was also runaways and hippies. And he would recruit out of the Haight-Ashbury Medical Clinic.
Right.
So...
with the intention of turning them into... Are we at killing machines?
We can talk about MK Ultra. So Jolly West claims he was never a part of MK Ultra. He was like, no, I was a CIA agent who was doing, experiments on people using LSD, but I wasn't part of that.
Yeah. And MK Ultra was the experiments with LSD to essentially turn people into...
So it started in 1949 as Project Bluebird. And it was really only on military personnel. They wanted to basically make like brainwashed assassins. And it was basically, a soldier could get dosed up on LSD, go into a place, commit a murder, have no memory of doing that, or murder someone like a woman or a child, which would like go against the soldier's moral code. It was basically a way to, get people to do things that morally they weren't okay with.
Right.
And, we can talk about Jolly West because we can talk about Jimmy Shafer, who he's in the book a little bit. So in the 1954, Jimmy Shafer is a airman at Lacken Air Force Base. And across from the Air Force Base, there's this bar. And one day, Jimmy Shafer, this, Air Force, I don't know if he was pilot or he was an airman. He, out of nowhere, having no history of mental illness or violence, goes over to the bar and kidnaps a 3-year-old girl, rapes her and kills her. And afterwards...
We should explain, a 3-year-old girl was at the bar because her parents lived in a neighboring house which had lost power or something along those lines. Or it was hot. They lost air conditioning. They brought the family to a bar nearby their home, and they had the genius idea of letting their 3-year-old play in the parking lot as they sat in a bar drinking.
Yes.
Just tremendous parents. And
it was the 50s. They did things like that.
Right. And unfortunately, that happened.
So you're talking about... there's no proof that Jimmy Shafer was experimented on by MK Ultra. There is proof that he had experimental doctor's treatment for his migraines. But you're talking about, if you're doing an MK Ultra, you're trying to make these hitmen that are going to go against their moral code. Like, this is the result you kind of want.
Yeah.
A perfect upstanding citizen. I don't know if he was upstanding or not, but
to commit a heinous act with essentially no memory of it.
Yes. And then afterwards, Jolly West is his psychiatrist. There's no proof that Jolly West was the one who experimented on him to begin with, who gave them this experimental treatment that kind of led to this whole thing. because Jimmy Shafer's file was missing from the Air Force. So, while there's no evidence that, I'd hate to say this, but while there's no evidence that Jolly West was giving him these treatments, there's also no evidence that he wasn't, just because it's missing.
Right.
And I know it's impossible to prove a negative, but also, the files are gone, so there's nothing to do but speculate.
Sure.
And also, after that, it was revealed many years later that Jolly West had corresponded with Sidney Gottlieb, who was the head of MK Ultra. And it was revealed that, in fact, Project Midnight Climax, that these LSD experiments he was doing in Haight-Ashbury's, that he was recruiting out of the same place where Charles Manson was hanging out every day, was in fact part of MK Ultra.
So, just to bring it a little
back
to the book.
We're already
that's just how this story is, though. We can go a million ways with it and still not have it covered, but
yeah. We should you go first.
No, I just wanted to kind of, what would you say is Tom O'Neill's ultimate sort of conclusion? I know he doesn't like to sort of speculate where he can't, where the facts won't go. But as far as Charles Manson is concerned specifically, what's the sort of end game for Tom? Is he saying, okay, Charles is definitively an agent of, whether it's the CIA or FBI or whatever, and what is the goal? Just to kind of disrupt the peace movement, the civil rights movement? Like, speak a little on that if you can.
I think specifically to Haight-Ashbury and San Francisco, he's trying to prove that this guy, Roger Smith, was not Manson's parole officer, that he was Manson's CIA handler, basically. We see Manson in a place where he has a direct link to a CIA agent. We see that his parole officer, Roger Smith, is getting him out of trouble, getting him out of arrest. Not only him, but also his followers, because Susan Atkins is also arrested at this time, and she's arrested a bit further upstate, and Roger Smith goes up there to defend her. And so he's not just getting Manson out of trouble, he's getting the family out of trouble. So I think that if you want to point to a grand CIA conspiracy that they were training these people to be MK Ultra assassins, then you have to believe that Roger Smith was his handler for the CIA.
It makes sense.
It makes sense. But also, you're talking about, we have to remember just how quickly everything happens, because Manson gets out of federal prison in 1967. In 2 years, he has a cult of almost 30 people who he can convince to commit murder. So
I think there's like certain politicians that could do that, You
may have a point.
Yeah, I don't even mean just necessarily Trump. I just mean throughout, like, a charismatic person can just kind of do insane, crazy things. Like, look at Barack Obama. Like, he came out of nowhere. I'm not saying Barack Obama can get people to kill for him. Although I might have in
Barack
2008.
Obama is using LSD to
I'm just
brainwash.
saying, I was pretty hyped about him when he first came out. But anyway, I don't know how
that would be a weird twist if Barack Obama came into the story.
Listen, did some LSD and I'm gonna kill your ass now. So sayonara, bitch.
Maybe we could work him in. Let's see. When was Barack? He was, I don't know. Barack Obama is from Chicago. Jack Ruby is from Chicago.
That's all I need.
Yeah, that's all the evidence I need.
Wrap it up. Obama killed JFK.
I should talk about the Jack Ruby thing also.
Yeah.
So Jolly West, who was doing LSD experiments, also was the psychiatrist for Jack Ruby back in 1963 after Jack Ruby killed Lee Harvey Oswald, who obviously murdered JFK. So if you want to bring the CIA into the JFK assassination, you can say that Jack Ruby was a MK Ultra hitman, because Jack Ruby, part of his defense was that he had suffered like an epileptic episode and has no memory of killing Lee Harvey Oswald. And the prison psychiatrist that viewed him before Jolly West got to him all said that, like, this man is not mentally ill, like he's actually perfectly capable of standing trial. Yeah. And then suddenly Jolly West, who's known for experimenting people on LSD, becomes a psychiatrist, and like within a couple of days Jack Ruby's completely insane and can't even talk and is completely rambling.
I mean, what is the like process behind, you know, but like, all right, I get someone into a room and I feed them LSD and I say what to them to get them to kill someone?
I don't know. I mean, it's also
LSD back then, I guess, might have been some wildly different shit than it is now.
Well,
but
here's the thing I keep in mind is that someone who's willingly taking LSD and someone
also
who's forced
that's a
take
very
it,
good point. Yeah,
they're going to have two very different results. So
100%. Plus the doses were probably insane.
So you can't compare someone. Yeah, you can't compare someone who's at Coachella hanging out with their friends taking a dab of acid. They're going to react differently than someone who's, you know, in a federal prison and being forced to drop acid, or just, you know, went to hang out with some, you know, hooker, and then suddenly their drink is filled with LSD. They're going to have very different results.
Suddenly they got Cosby.
Suddenly, yeah,
dude, maybe Cosby was in the.
We can.
I'm just saying.
He was actually recruiting assassins.
I'm just saying Cosby killed JFK. That's it. That's my takeaway. Sorry, I'm real helpful on this.
No. It's good.
All right,
we can try to throw him in.
Fuck Bill Cosby. I don't even want to say his name.
But was he from Chicago?
I have no idea.
Isn't that where the Cosby Show took place?
I can't speak on that. I didn't watch that.
I think he was part of MK Ultra. I think we just proved it.
Fuck Bill Cosby. Let's make that clear.
Yes, let's make that clear.
Where are we? Take us back.
So we're taking back. We kind of went off because I wasn't planning on bringing up MK Ultra or Jack Ruby later.
Yeah,
but right. You know, it's fine.
Life isn't planned.
I actually don't really like agree with what Tom O'Neill says about Jack Ruby, at least with the assassination part.
You don't think that Jack Ruby was part of came out of MK Ultra?
No, I agree that I think Jolly West dosed him up with acid to drive him insane. I don't think the assassination was really an MK Ultra thing.
The assassination of Oswald?
Of Lee Harvey Oswald. I think that it was a CIA plot, but that it could have been, you know, I guess if we're talking out there, Frank Sheeran in The Irishman has a different theory. Yeah,
but
we don't have to.
He's not so credible.
He's not entirely credible, but what he was saying was that kind of plans into the mafia's assassination of JFK on behalf of the CIA.
Right. Is
that basically Lee Harvey Oswald was always going to be their scapegoat, but when Lee Harvey Oswald escapes to the warehouse after he kills JFK, he was supposed to be met by police on Jack Ruby's payroll, because Jack Ruby was known for
his connections.
His connections in the police department. And it's basically, if you wanted to bribe a cop, Jack Ruby was who you went to in Dallas. So the idea was Lee Harvey Oswald was supposed to go to the warehouse thinking that was a safe house. He was going to be met by Jack Ruby's police officers who were going to kill him right there. But the actual Dallas PD got there first and arrested him.
who were not in on it.
Who were not in on it.
Right.
So basically,
we should also mention. We should also mention that it's not above the CIA to try to work with organized crime, because wasn't there some plan for Castro that involved the mafia?
Operation Mongoose was,
by the way, that's not as good as Operation Climax.
No, not as good. Operation Mongoose. This was in 1961, I want to say. So the mafia still, the mafia had a lot of casinos in Cuba, in Havana,
right,
in the 50s. I mean, in the 50s in Havana was basically controlled by the mafia. So after Fidel Castro takes over, one of his main goals is he wants to kick the mafia out of Cuba. So the CIA knows that the mafia is trying to get back at Fidel Castro. They know that the mafia has a lot of connections to anti-Castro Cuban refugees, because a lot of the Cuban refugees who Castro kicked out ended up working for the mob, because they had this thing called bolita, which was basically like an illegal lottery.
Yeah. Numbers, right?
It was it's the same thing as numbers. Well, it's the same thing as the lottery. You know, right. It's done on a smaller level, and it's illegal, and it's run by the mob. So Operation Mongoose was basically that when the mob was going to be allowed back into Cuba for a bit under Castro, basically to just liquidate their casinos. And the idea was that when they did that, they would send someone to hit out Fidel Castro. So there is precedent of the CIA working with the mafia.
Right.
And if you're talking about, you know, the conspiracy of the mob killed JFK, yeah, it was supposed to be a
similar time frame too. I mean,
it was 2 years later.
Right.
Yes,
exactly.
It was 2 years later. I mean, you're talking about Jack Ruby, who not only was connected with the mafia, he was a part of Operation Mongoose. Like, he was going to be one of the killers who took out Fidel Castro.
Yeah.
So this is a guy that they've used before.
Fucking crazy.
Yeah, and it was basically, you know, after he screwed up getting Oswald killed by his corrupt cops, the mob came to him and said, you have to take out Oswald and go to prison for the rest of your life, or we're going to kill your family. I mean, I suppose you can go with that, or you can go with the CIA grabbed him because he messed this up, dosed him up with LSD, told him to go shoot Lee Harvey Oswald. I mean, if we're talking speculation, you could really go with either.
Yeah, pretty grisly either way.
Pretty grisly. I mean, so we're talking about the CIA's willingness to work with kind of shady figures. And so I want to bring up kind of Operation Bloodstone for a bit. So Operation Bloodstone was basically one of the CIA's first operations. It was basically to grab Nazis from post-World War II Germany to go in and work for them basically as undercovers for around the world.
And this is how long before Operation Paperclip, which also involved Nazis? Right?
I think it's the same year.
Okay.
Operation Paperclip was basically rounding up the Nazi scientists for NASA.
Right.
But it's 1947, the first year that the CIA is created, and then 2 years later is MK Ultra. So when you talk about the CIA as this like boogeyman throughout American history who's like responsible for all this evil stuff, you know, there's evidence to kind of support it. I mean, this was never an agency that wasn't corrupt.
Yeah, from the beginning, as you're saying, it's kind of almost kind of built on corruption in a sense. Like, I mean, unless they, you know, I mean, you're saying that was the first year that the CIA actually
That's
existed?
one of their first operations, because they're founded in 1947, and that was the year that Operation Bloodstone started. We should move back to the Haight-Ashbury Clinic. Well, we talked.
How long until Ghislaine Maxwell is dead? That's what I want to know.
She's already dead. She's been dead.
She might as well be.
She's been dead.
You think so?
MK Ultra got her.
Jack.
Oh my God, we're going
Jack
deep
Ruby
into
Jack Ruby was on Epstein's private plane.
Yeah,
he's in the lot.
He's the one who killed. He killed Epstein in prison. Jack Ruby.
Wow.
I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to thinking that Epstein was some CIA operative. I mean,
no, of course not.
No.
I think that's the kind of prevailing theory, almost.
Was
not necessarily CIA, but
that he was basically blackmailing people for intelligence.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to necessarily mention, other shows or something, but I came across, just because I don't know what the rules are with YouTube. And,
I mean, it doesn't matter. It's better if we just pretend all other podcasts don't exist.
Yeah, that'll work out real well. There's only about 18 billion of them. It was just pointing out that it's like a pretty classic scheme that's been done a number of times where, someone poses as someone they're not and is actually working for a high-level government, agency, and they're basically just sort of jeopardizing people, getting them in situations that compromises them rather, whether it's with orgies and sex or drugs. Or,
I mean, who knows if Charles Manson wasn't doing that?
Right.
He was hosting orgies with underage girls with lots of drugs, in the height of the hippie movement.
Yeah.
And
it's just wild that we have such a recent seemingly example of that with Epstein.
But so basically, so there's the MK Ultra experiments at the Haight-Ashbury that, Charles Manson is a part of. And then in like late 1968, he moves down to Los Angeles. And this is kind of where a guy named Reese Winston.
Couldn't help myself.
Reeves Winston.
Sorry.
Kind of gets involved. He's a CIA agent. There's like no actual proof that he was a chaos agent but there's also no proof of anybody being a chaos agent because the CIA destroyed all their files. Because in the 70s, when these two programs, Chaos and Cointel Pro, were kind of discovered, that the CIA and the FBI had two different programs that were designed to destroy the anti-war movement and destroy the Black Panthers. The CIA just destroyed all their files.
And the situation with the Black Panthers was insane because didn't you mention something about they were suspicious of their own members being cooperating witnesses with the government, so they started kind of assassinating within their group?
I know that some people got killed. Well, so Cointel Pro, the entire point was to turn these groups against each other.
Right. Yeah.
They wanted the Black Panthers to hate the anti-war movement. There was this group of like rich Hollywood white people, like Jane Fonda was a part of them. They called themselves the White Panthers. And basically they were, rich Hollywood liberals who supported the Black Panthers. And part of Cointel Pro was to get them to stop supporting this group because they didn't want like America as a whole to see the Black Panthers as being sympathetic. So they wanted to make these Hollywood liberals think that when the Black Panther finally have their like revolution, that they're going to be murdered also. And you talk about Charles Manson, who killed these rich Hollywood people in the Sharon Tate Roman Polanski house that was known for hosting parties for, you know, everyone in Hollywood. I mean, Roman Polanski was the biggest director at the time. And everyone in Hollywood had kind of been to that house. So you're talking about a mass murder of well-liked people in Hollywood in a house that everybody had been to, and it's being blamed on the Black Panthers. I mean, that can't be more what Cointel Pro wanted to happen. They wanted these two groups to hate each other. And then bringing in the fact that Charles Manson was a hippie and that now you're viewing hippies as being evil. I know, like, it kind of falls apart on itself, because if you know that Charles Manson's the actual killer, then why would they hate the Black Panthers? But, I mean, my theory, at least, was that there was at least a time after the murders where the FBI and the CIA were like, let's just let people think that the Black Panthers did this. And
if today's society is any indication, I mean, racists will literally take the smallest possible crumb and eat it up. Recently, we have the death of a 5-year-old child
who was murdered in front of his 7 and 8-year-old sister,
being co-opted by people,
being co-opted by racists
to speak against the Black Lives Matter movement. So if you want to see racism, you'll fucking find it.
I mean, I'm sure that there were people in America who, even after Charles Manson, if you want to be
racist, you'll find a way to be racist. That's a better way to say it. I'm
sure there were people in America who, even after Charles Manson was arrested, still hated the Black Panthers for this.
Of course.
Probably.
You could, I mean, it's like, you know, you could tell someone the facts, but if if facts don't matter to them, then, you know, you're not going to get anywhere. But also, just to point out, I mean, because now you have, like, all right, not only are there these examples where it lines up in Manson's story of him being around people that seem to have a connection to the CIA or these programs, but now you have the actions of Manson and the family kind of achieving the goals of those.
Well, he achieved the goals of two programs.
Right.
So, yeah, there was Chaos that wanted to dismantle the anti-war and the hippie movement. Manson did that for them. And there was MK Ultra that wanted to turn innocent people into assassins. Charles Manson did that for them, because none of these girls had violent pasts. I mean, I think Ted Watson had been arrested before, but besides that, you know, I don't think Susan Atkins was a prostitute before she found Charles. Still, there's no violence. I mean,
that's not,
Yeah, there's no violence.
She's gonna...
Susan Atkins killed Epstein.
Probably. What's the median age of all these people? They're in their 20s or even younger?
Even younger. I mean, there were girls as young as 14, 15.
And Manson was like in his mid-30s or something?
Manson is 30. He's 32 when he's released in prison. So at the time of the murders, he's 34.
35, yeah.
He's 34 or 35.
Going on 70.
Well, he was a ridiculously ugly person.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So Reese Winston is a character who is kind of... There's no record of him working at the CIA, but his family believes that he worked for the CIA. There is record that he was undercover with the hippie movement, that he was this super right-wing conservative guy who he hated the hippies and he had gone undercover with them. And he says that he was embedded with the Manson family before the murders, and even said that he was at the Sharon Tate house after the murders happened. Also, Charles Manson claims that he went to the Sharon Tate house after the murders happened before the police showed up. So who knows if they went there together, you know? And you're talking about Charles Manson and the CIA operative are going to the crime scene.
So you're potentially alleging the possibility that not only were Manson's actions a result of CIA training or whatever you want to call it, but they could have been like fundamentally involved in that particular event.
I mean, they could have. He did what he wanted. I don't know if that's...
Meaning like the planning and the execution of that event.
I don't know if that's what I believe.
Right.
I don't think it's outside the realm of possibilities. Mm-hmm. Especially, you know, I don't know specifically what Tom O'Neill believes, but, you know.
Well, I mean, he generally is pretty good about...
He's good at just saying the facts and not speculating. I'm going to speculate.
Yeah.
This is what I think happened. Mm-hmm. I think that Charles Manson got the idea in his head about this race war between black people and white people because of what he was hearing from the CIA operatives. I don't know if they sent him there. I think that maybe they inadvertently taught him some mind control tricks with MK Ultra. He used that on the girls, and since he believed that this race war was coming, he wanted to get ahead of the curve, and he sent his girls there because of that. I don't know if really... I don't think like the CIA wanted Sharon Tate to be murdered, you know? I think it's more just a coincidence that, you know, they got what they wanted. But I do kind of think, and, you know, Tom O'Neill hints at this in the book, that there was at least some... there was at least... They wanted to, at some point, kind of divert the attention away from Manson after the murders. Because it took 4 months to arrest him, but they should have known right away. Especially with... so I should get into the... There was one murder that took place before Sharon Tate, who... I'm skipping on the name, but basically they murdered someone and they wrote like pig or something on the wall, and then it was like the next day that the Sharon Tate murder happened, and like that's enough connection itself.
Right.
It just seems like they should have caught this guy much sooner, you know. I mean, essentially that they knew who did it, and for whatever reason took their time making the arrest. Yeah.
Yeah, man. It's a crazy book.
It is.
You recommend it for people?
I recommend it, even if you don't believe any of it, even if you think it's just conspiracy theory nonsense, you should still read it. Just as like a testament to journalism itself.
Yeah, shout out to Tom O'Neill, man.
Yeah.
What an amazing, again, I said it at the top, but just an amazing, you know, personal story of kind of believing in yourself and like just not taking no for an answer when it comes to getting something out into the world. I mean, I could relate to that, you know, from a music level of just being like, no, you know, like everyone thinks you're fucking crazy. Why people start leaving you, and you're like, no, man. And then boom, you get to tell your story. Like it does fucking happen. Like you know, and it just makes it all the more sweet when it does happen. But he, hopefully we'll hear from him again, because this was, and also his collaborator, excuse me, Dan Piepenbring. I don't know if I'm saying that
I'm
right.
not sure how to pronounce it.
But he also worked on Prince's memoir.
Yes, I did know that.
Yeah. And they were working on a memoir as Prince died.
When he died. But that never... did that ever come out?
I don't know if it did. I remember I think he was on an episode of Fresh Air that I heard. But he was telling the story of like how he got to work with Prince. So I don't know if it ever came out. But anyway, yeah. So, I mean, that's chaos.
That's chaos.
You know,
read it. Don't trust the CIA.
Yeah.
Charles Manson killed Jeffrey Epstein.
Jeffrey Epstein's still alive. He's really Joe Biden. We're all going to hell, and you know, that's pretty much it. So,
and that's it.
You can't be saved. Don't even try.
Yes. And we didn't talk about movies at all, but it's cool. It's all good.
Yeah, it's a podcast about movies. Here's a book.
Yeah.
No, but you know,
I can talk about one quick thing. Roman Polanski was a terrible person.
Yeah, fuck Roman Polanski. Fuck Bill Cosby.
And Roman Polanski was a terrible person. He made one good movie. He made Rosemary's Baby. The rest of his movies are trash. And I went to film school, so my opinion is canon.
Also, shout out to our mother, whose name is Rosemary.
Yes. And I am Rosemary's Baby because...
me too, and I was here first because I'm older than you, so fine. Fuck you.
All right. I guess we're signing off. So everybody, have a good day. Let's watch the YouTube channel. Follow us on social media at Movies by McManus.
Yes. Well, I'm just saying for the podcast audio people out there, I said it at the top, I'll say it again. If you want to see the video version for whatever creepy reason you want to look at us and do whatever you do.
Yeah, we're not that good looking, so you don't have to.
You know, check out our YouTube channel. Also, Greg does reviews that are kind of more straightforward. This is obviously more of a free-form version. And check us out on social media at Movies by McManus, and we'll see you soon. Anything else?
Nope. I'll see you next time. Everybody, have a good day. Stay safe.